Hello and welcome to the Falcon IT Services Cybersecurity course, Part 4, Data Privacy. So our agenda today will be what is data privacy, what are the different types of data privacy, and how to protect data. So what is data privacy? Data privacy refers to the protection of personal information from unauthorized access or use by others. It's the rights of individuals and groups to determine for themselves when and how information about them is communicated to others. Data privacy is becoming increasingly important in our digital age, where more and more personal information is being collected and stored online. Data breaches can have serious consequences, including identity theft, financial loss, and reputational damage. Privacy concerns for organizations. HIPAA Act of 1996 is a concern, or actually if you're a healthcare provider, it's a regulatory body. We have others such as the Privacy Act of 1974 for federal agencies. We have GLBA for banks and financial institutions. And why are these of concern for organizations? Well, if you are in a regulated industry, it's important to maintain regulations, and not doing so could result in, on top of lawsuits that are presented by the people who are affected, the regulatory bodies can also levy fees or penalties related to data breaches. Personal privacy. Protections against undue interference such as searches and snooping. Where employers have the right to monitor their systems and premises, it's important to post conspicuous notices to let people be aware that they are being monitored. So if you're an employee, it's important to let people know whether you're monitoring a computer, or even if you're monitoring, for example, using a camera system, you have to post conspicuous notices letting people know that they are being monitored. BYOD is bring your own device, and those could become privacy concerns and even nightmares in some scenarios, because you are commingling someone's personal data with business data. And whereas a business, some businesses really need to monitor their employees, and they also need access to the information that's on devices. So if an employee is using a personal device, they're commingling the two things. Some of the concerns are, for example, what happens if that device, for example, is subpoenaed, right? And law enforcement has to go because the company's under a lawsuit. Well, their personal information is going to be alongside the business information that is being subpoenaed. That's one concern right there. The other is when IT personnel go to work on those devices, they may inadvertently access information that belongs to the person, and that is private information that's not necessarily have to do with the company. Also, when these devices, for example, whether it's a phone, a laptop, or a tablet, if it breaks and the person that owns it takes it to a repair shop, the repair people have access to that device, and they may have also access to your company's information or your organization's information. And lastly, if the person leaves the organization, you cannot really wipe that device and make sure that your data is not out there without also wiping their personal information. So that's some of the concerns of privacy and BYOD. I personally always recommend that organizations provide their employees with a company-issued device where they can conduct business so as to not commingle the two things. Personal privacy. A data broker is a company that specializes in collecting and aggregating personal data, such as income, ethnicity, political beliefs, geolocation data, or data about companies, whether they're from public records or sourced privately, and they sell or license information to third parties. In a recent project, researchers purchased 45,000 service members' data for as little as 12 cents each. including in one data set, the results showed service members living near military facilities. The researchers found that many of the brokers lacked control on who could purchase the data or regulations in place to ascertain the intended use of that information. Larger purchases of over 1.5 million service members were made available for as little as 1 cent per record. So if organizations are able, or individuals are able, to go and purchase records of U.S. service members, okay, for this little bit of money, and there's no oversight as to how they're using that. Imagine what they are able to purchase about you as an individual. So that's why it's very, very important that we limit the amount of information that these aggregates are collecting from us. And how do they do it? Well, there's a lot of different ways. Our phones provide a wealth of information, and we also install apps. And if you read the terms and conditions of a lot of these apps, they do collect information. They could go through your phone book and read your contacts to determine who you're communicating with. They may be able to go through your texts, and there's they geolocation. They know where you drive to and from. So all this information, these app developers then sell it to data aggregators who put it together and then put it out for sale to people that may be interested. So somebody may go out there and buy a list of, for example, people over 60 who have a certain type of condition so that they could sell their product to this person. But again, there's very little oversight as to who could buy the data and how that data is used. The data about the military personnel purchase as part of this study included full names, physical address, email addresses, health and financial information, and details about their ethnicity, religious practices, and political affiliation. Information about their children was also made available, and the source of this was from a research, and you can find it on Axios.com. So data brokers collect a huge volume of detailed information on hundreds of millions of consumers throughout the world, and they operate behind a veil of secrecy. There's really not a lot of oversight. It's kind of a black box. So you really have no way of knowing what exactly they're doing with that information that they collect about you. And not all data brokers even tell you that they have information or what information they have about you. And the source of this is the United States Senate Committee paper, A Review of Data Broker Industry, Collection, Use, and Sale of Consumer Data for Marketing Purposes. Personal privacy. A person's age, birth date, personal details, contact details, birth certificates, online shopping accounts, login credentials, all these are personal private data that belongs to an individual. But a lot of this data could be collected either from computers, from the phone, from the web, and from a variety of places, and data aggregators collect this information about us. Now, what is inference? It's a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence or reasoning. So PII, or personally identifiable information, is data that can be used to identify a person. An example of PII is a driver's license number, a name or an address, or a social security number. If I have your social security number or your driver's license, I know exactly who you are, right? But I'm going to show you how inference plays in on this. Information that is not PII by itself can become PII based on context. So if I tell you, for example, zip code 33141, that is not personally identifiable information. But if I put two pieces of information, such as a name and a zip code, even though those two things, like for example, the name John Doe may be a very generic name, and it may not be PII just seeing on the web John Doe, but John Doe plus his John Doe zip code, those two pieces of information can help identify exactly which John Doe we're talking about with an over 99% accuracy rate and we're going to show you how that's done. And if you go to this website, aboutmyinfo.org, there's a nifty little program in there, a database, where you can actually enter your date of birth and your zip code, and it can identify you with a 99% or better accuracy. So again, there's data, and data could be inferred. So one example of inference here is a piece of data which is just a to and from address. And I'm going to show you how a company, Uber, was managed to make an inference based on data. So this company tracked, according to CBS News Bay Area, which is where I got this article from, it tracked usage of services during Friday and Saturday night. So if you went to a specific place, like a club, on a Friday or Saturday night, from your home address to the club, but then you didn't return from the club to your home address. Instead, you went from the club to another address, and then the next morning you went from that address back to your home address. The inference was that you were doing a one-night stand, and this company kept track of people who had one-night stands. They even had a nifty name for it, called a ride of glory. And so they were able to kind of compartmentalize people based on pieces of information which are just to and from address. So I was alluding to the website before, and where you could enter some information, and this is to show how even when companies collect information about us and they tell us that it's anonymous data could be de-anonymized, anonymized to identify you. So in this slide that I'm showing you here, which is actually it's right here, aboutmyinfo.org, aboutmyinfo.org. You go there, and I entered my date of birth, right, which is, a lot of people have my birth date, okay, and I entered my zip code, and lo and behold, I am the only person with my birth date that lives in my zip code. So again, what seems to be very generic data, like a calendar date, a birth date, and just a zip code, when you put those two pieces together, they could be used to identify me as an individual. Classify your data. Data is classified according to its sensitivity level, right? You could have high, medium, low. There could be top secret, internal use only, or public. There's a lot of different ways to categorize it, and every company will probably want to do it differently, but it's important that we categorize our data. High sensitivity data is data that, if it's compromised or destroyed in an unauthorized transaction, would have a catastrophic impact on the organization or individual. So for example, somebody's social security number, their HR records, or their medical records. If something like that gets lost or stolen, it could have a catastrophic impact on a person. So this is where you would categorize something at a high level. Data classification models are up to you. There are a lot of ways. You could have, for example, sensitive, private, and public. You could have top secret, internal use only, public. You could have high, medium, and low. It's just important to classify your data. Now, there are programs such as DLP which help you to classify data and to protect data. But even if you're not using DLP, which is data loss prevention software, it's important that you categorize. So for example, when you create a document, or when you create a spreadsheet, or when you create some type of financial information, mark it somewhere so that people who are using that document are aware that that document may be sensitive, or that document may be just private, where it could be shared within the company, or that document may be public, so that they're aware of how they should handle that a particular document or piece of data. Also, you should define how the different levels of data can be transferred, accessed. So for example, your sensitive data, you may have a rule in place that says if the data is sensitive, you cannot send it by email. You cannot access it while, share it with one of your other coworkers unless they are in such and such department, unless they have, certain managerial or access abilities. Whereas, private information, you can send it by email as long as it's encrypted. So that's all something that everybody could decide on. And if you need some ideas or you need some help, you can call us and we will help you with that. But again, classify your data and define how each of these classifications, how that data, where it could be stored, how it can be sent, and who can access based on their categorizations. What is PHI? PHI, or Protected Health Information, is any information in the medical record or designated record that can be used to identify an individual and that it was created, used, or disclosed in the course of providing a healthcare service such as a diagnosis or treatment. Patient names, account numbers, blood test results, billing information, MRI scan results, etc., etc., etc. These are all examples of PHI, or Protected Health Information. PCI, or payment card information, is any data used in a payment card processing transaction. So credit card numbers, PIN, cardholder names, etc. are examples of PCI. What is IP? IP, or intellectual property, is a work that is a result of creativity. So manuscripts, designs, copyrights, trademarks, inventions, etc. These are all IT, or intellectual property. Data acquisition. Acquire only data that serves a business purpose. Don't be a pack rat, and I see this all the time. Companies collect a lot more information that they need, and they hold on to it for a lot longer than they need it. Once data no longer serves a particular business purpose, delete it, get rid of it. And any data that does not serve a business purpose shouldn't be collected. So for example, if you are if you're billing somebody their credit card for a product, you may collect their name, their address, where you could ship the product. Now, it may not, if that person doesn't want to have repeat business with you, there's really no need to collect and store that credit card information. Don't just have it sitting in somewhere in your database if you don't think this person's going to come back to purchase from you again. And if they do, they could enter their card again. It's a lot safer than just keeping a database with a bunch of credit cards, because if that database ever gets compromised, then you have all these credit cards that really didn't serve a particular business purpose other than that one transaction, and they're just sitting there and they could be a liability for you. Destroy data after it has served its purpose. So for example, if you have an employee and you retain their Social Security for HR, etc., after a certain number of years, you may want to consider deleting that information so that it's no longer there. Define what data could be collected and create a written policy so that your employees know what they could collect and where they could store it. Define the medium where private data can be entered and stored. Define the levels of protection. If you break down privacy to different levels, you can better protect it with what's called access of least privilege. While all HR data is private, an employee's Social Security number may be more private than their earnings, or than their address, or than a photo of them, right? So by defining protection categories, you could grant access based on protection levels. So for example, the payroll team may have access to all the employees' salaries, but they don't really need access to their Social Security numbers or to their tax returns. That may only be needed by the person within the HR department that does a certain function, which is either the accounting or the CPA functions. So I see a lot of times where, for example, there's a creation of a department like HR, there's 3-4 employees, and they all have the same access levels. If you can define who needs access to what, and just grant them access to what they need, then you're using access of least privilege, and that is it's a much more safer way of taking care of the information that you have access to. So use ACLs, or access control lists, and access of least privileges. ACLs is where you have folders on either a network or in some type of storage systems, and these folders are where you store information and you grant access only to certain people on an as-needed basis. When creating network folders, call our help desk so that we can apply access control lists to data that is sensitive. Encrypt folders with private data, especially if the data is portable. So for example, if you're copying some data to a USB drive, or you're copying that data, or you're taking it with you in your laptop and you've got personal data, encrypt it just in case that laptop is lost or stolen, or if that USB drive is lost or stolen. Use file auditing and DLP to monitor and prevent exfiltration of private data. So there are a lot of different ways that you could see who's accessing the data and what they're doing with it. So if you have, for example, intellectual property, there are ways that you can make sure that if any of your employees who have access to that are copying that data to a USB drive or uploading it to a web drive or to their email address, the DLP software will alert you. And if this is something that you'd be interested in, you could contact us and we'll explain more about that. Collect only what is necessary and destroy what no longer serves a business purpose. So how do we check ACL permissions on network folders? If you go to a network folder and you right click on it and you go to properties, you'll see tabs, general security, previous versions, and customize. If you click on the security tab, you'll see a list of the people and groups who have access to that folder. So before you start putting sensitive information on a network folder, right click on it, go to properties, then security, to see who is going to have access to the folder where you are putting your data in. And a lot of times I see departments that create their folders, they'll have read and write access, for example, to a folder called HR, and they'll create a subfolder called, Social Security, scans, and they'll start putting Social Security scans in there. But everybody who's got access to HR will have access to that folder, because the folder uses the permissions that it's under, right, or the parent permissions. So if you're going to do that and you want to limit that only to a certain individual within the HR department, just call us and we'll help you to limit who has access to that folder that you've just created. So what happens when you create a new subfolder within a network? Again, if you create a folder in a network, that folder will take the permission from the parent that's immediately above it. So if you have a folder on the network called Cybersecurity Training, and inside that folder you create a folder called Cybersecurity Training Documents Private, okay, anybody who has access to cybersecurity training will also have access to cybersecurity training private, unless you contact us and we are able to change the ACLs or the access controls so that less people have access to that folder. So data has 3 states: at rest, in use, and in transit. So it's important to protect data in all 3 states by creating policies that dictate how data should be handled. Avoid data sprawl. Keep your private data centralized so that it can be tracked and managed easily. Use the law of parsimony. Keep it simple, right? I know that nowadays data is ubiquitous, right? We have in the old days we used to have a network share and you'd put your data there and that's where it was. Today that network share may not be as prevalent as it used to be, right? People now keep data in the cloud, and that data is accessible through a variety of devices, and it may synchronize, and that data gets copied to other things, right? So this is something that's called data sprawl, and it's very important to keep track of your private data. So label your data and inventory it and track it. So if you've got data in your centralized network and you know that you're going to take a copy of it and you're going to put it on some cloud storage because you have an employee that works remote or something that needs to access it from there, make an inventory of that so that you know that that data is there, and don't remove that from your inventory until you've destroyed the data, because if you don't do that, you may forget, or the employee that put it there may leave the company, and then nobody knows that that data is sitting somewhere. And this could happen over and over and over, and data starts to sprawl through different different silos, and then you don't know where things are, and then you have a big liability in your hands. Read the cloud provider's user agreement and see how they handle data and who has access to the data that's outside your organization, and make sure that your service provider can comply with your requirements. Never reuse passwords, and always use two-factor authentication to access cloud provider services, especially if you have sensitive data that you're storing in the cloud. And don't fall for phishing links that can expose your session cookies. And of course, take cyber awareness trainings, which is what you're doing here. Encrypt files before uploading them, or ask your provider if they have file encryption available. It's if you have sensitive data and you're putting it up in the cloud, yes, you should encrypt it locally with some type of an encryption program, and then do the upload. So you could find PII in search engines. So here, for example, I Googled my name, and I found that my name, my address, and some information, for example, about my home, it could all be found online. If you want to remove that from search engines, most of them have a way to have that information removed. So in this example is from a Google search, and you can see those three little dots next to the search result. If you click on those three little dots, you'll see there's an option which is called remove result, and you can click on that. They'll ask you, why do you want it removed? And you just state that it's personal data of yours that you don't want out there, and they will remove it. Protecting data in use. Watch out for shoulder surfers when you are using any kind of private data. So shoulder surfers, if you remember, we talked about it during the passwords, are people that look over your shoulder. So if you have, for example, a patient record that you're looking at, make sure that you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, because then they might see that patient record, and the patient may not want whatever they're being treated for to be seen by somebody other than their doctor. Don't enter PII, PHI, or PCI when using a remote support session. We often use remote support these days. You may have used remote support not only with us, right, where you call our help desk, and our help desk remotes into your computer to help you out, but with a multitude of other vendors. Sometimes we're using software for collaboration, and there's several people, and we have our computer set up as a whiteboard, and we are presenters. And so that means that other people are looking at your desktop. So when that is happening, keep in mind that if you have a spreadsheet open with some information that's private, such as a spreadsheet with passwords or somebody's medical record, you don't accidentally show that to the people that are on the remote session. Don't click the view password icon when connected to a via remote session, because then you don't want the people that are connected remotely to see the password that you're typing. If you need to view sensitive information and you have somebody that's remotely connected, disconnect them, or ask them to disconnect, and make sure that they've disconnected before you view the sensitive data. Never use a password that was given to you. always change passwords that were provided to you. So if you call our help desk, they'll usually provide you a temporary password, which, for example, whether it's for the VPN or whether it's for your email or whether it's for your network, that password is temporary and you should change it. It should automatically prompt you to change it right away. And the same goes for all other services. When you're interacting with any person, you should always have your password changed so that only you know that password. And report any instances of static passwords to our management. Whether it's from us or whether it's from another vendor or for anybody that gives you a password and they do not request it to be changed and you don't change it, please let us know. Before viewing protected information, check who has access to your physical screen, like shoulder surfers, and who has virtual access via remote desktop access. Close remote sessions when with the help desk before opening or viewing any kind of private information, and do not click on the show password icon when you have somebody connected remotely. Use encryption if possible to secure data stored on storage media. Prevent the use of simple passwords or simple retrieval mechanisms. Retrieval mechanisms are, for example, the name of your dog, the name, what school you went to. Sometimes companies where you open up an account will ask you for these types of information in order to reset your password, or in case you've lost or forgotten your password, you could be identified that way. This is a terrible idea because usually that information can be found on social media. What I like to do is I give fake information out, and I keep in my password book a list of the fake information that I give out. I give them a fake school that I went to. I gave them the fake name of my first car, and I give them a fake dog's name. Okay, so that if somebody's going through my social media, they cannot find that information. Use data loss prevention software to fence sensitive information and data to make sure it's not leaving your network, and implement file auditing and file access logging if possible. I mean, I know that all these things are, we talked about security and convenience at the beginning. All these things are not only inconvenience, but they may incur additional costs. But if you could do it, it's a great thing to have. File auditing and software such as DLP to further protect your private data. Don't rely on others to keep your data safe. Even large organizations have employees that are not trained in privacy, and they break the rules of the organizations themselves that they work for. So this is very important. As you can see here, this is a very large organization that an employee sent me an email asking me for a copy of my driver's license, and they just asked me to send it to them by email. The large organization, I'm sure, does not condone that for privacy reasons. Remember, when you send something by email, that it just doesn't end up in that person's mailbox. People's mailboxes synchronize with their not only computer at work, but it sits on a mail server somewhere. It usually synchronizes with a phone, a tablet. Sometimes people access their mail through their personal or home computers, and it synchronizes through that. So if my driver's license, as an example from the prior slide, if I would have sent that person my driver's license, my PII would be in 4 locations, right? Potentially, right? In that person's computer, in their tablet, in their phone, and in the Exchange server. And sometimes you see there's somebody sends some PII and there's 3 or 4 people copied on that email, right? They CC 3 other people. So that would make my information that I've sent now resides in 16 locations. Any one of those locations, any one of those phones, any one of those computers winds up in a repair place, that my information may be exposed. Use a secure service with encryption to transmit data, sensitive data. Encrypt files that contain sensitive information, especially on mobile devices. Don't allow sensitive data to be stored and forgotten. Keep track of it, inventory it. Keep track of IT assets and properly destroy them when no longer in use. Scan transit channels for sensitive data using software such as data loss prevention. And just because you read somewhere that they have end-to-end encryption or HIPAA compliant doesn't make it automatic. Remember, end-to-end encryption means that the information is being encrypted when it is in transit. When it's sitting on that person's device, and somebody gets access to that device, it could still be exposed. So for example, I could send you an encrypted email, and sure, it's safe and it's encrypted in transit, but it's sitting in your mailbox. Well, what happens if somebody grabs your username and password and they're able to access your mailbox? They're able to access what I've sent you. Or if somebody sits at your desk and gets into your Outlook when you're taking a break, they could still access that information. So here, protecting data in transit. Once again, don't rely on what others tell you. Gain the necessary knowledge so that you yourself could carve out your own security path. In this example here on the left, this is a very large company, a Fortune 500 as a matter of fact, and they are asking me for a bank statement. They wanted my W-2 tax return, and they wanted a copy of my driver's license. So I wrote, okay, how do we do this? And the employee just wrote back, well, just reply to this email, scan it, and attach it. Well, I was kind of taken back because I did not think that this large company would probably have a policy to ask employees to send that information by email. When I wrote back and I told them that I didn't feel comfortable doing that, then that employee sent me a link to that company. They have on their website, they actually have a secure document upload, and you can see the button on the right. So, but if I hadn't asked, and if I hadn't told the employee that I didn't feel comfortable, the employee was probably just, being lazy. They were probably just figuring, hey, I could get him to send it by email. It's going to be a lot easier for me than to have to go and log into this document retrieval system and create a temporary, link for him. So, but what happens is if this employee is doing this, breaking their company's own rules all the time, this employee's mailbox may have a bunch of people's W-2 and a bunch of people's driver's license. And if that employee's mailbox ever gets compromised, then all those documents could be compromised. And that's why I did not send it to that person via email. If someone sends you this type of information by email, like for example, if someone sends you a W-2 and your company's policy doesn't, allow that, okay? But let's say that they do send it to you. You should remove the attachment, and then you should delete the email so that it's completely gone. And why is that? Well, even though they send it to you and you didn't ask for it, it's now in your Outlook, or it's now in your mailbox, inbox, or your deleted items, or wherever it is. And if that ever becomes compromised, then you could still be liable for that. So if someone breaks rules and does something, that it could become a liability for you. So it's important to just remove it. And actually, you could even go one step further, and you could contact us and we'll do this for you. But I always recommend that all organizations should have a rule in their mail server that states that they do not accept any type of financial information or personal information by email. And the mail servers could check to make sure, and if they look that any text within a PDF or any text within the email state that there is either a social security number, a credit card number, or a bank wire account number, it'll reject the email, so you don't have the liability that somebody could send it to you and it's sitting in your server. Your server will just flat out reject it. And I definitely recommend that. So is Outlook with Office 365 HIPAA compliant? Well, yes and no. So yes, it can be, but no, not out of the box. So when you are sending an email, it needs to be encrypted if you want to send any kind of HIPAA or PII. And a lot of organizations have the ability for you to further secure your infrastructure, whether it's your cloud infrastructure, but it needs to have things done. It's not out of the box. So contact us and we'll help you, to have additional layers of securities that you can add on to your services, including your mail servers. So in this example here, you can encrypt the email by clicking on that little encryption icon that you see there. So any information that you send that contains private data should be encrypted. You could also create a rule that states that if one of your employees is sending an email and that email contains either a social security number or a bank number or something, that then if it's not encrypted, if they forgot to click on that little encryption icon, it is not going to allow that email to go through. But again, this is not out of the box. This is something that has to be specifically set up. So Nextcloud is a utility that we provide, and it is absolutely free of charge for our clients to use. And what you could do is you could use that to securely transmit information between entities, right, via encrypted channels. So if you have a document that you want to share with someone and you need to do it securely or encrypted, you could use this service. Just give us a call. We'll set you up with an account. And we give you a very limited amount of space because we ask you to delete the information from there once you've transmitted it, so that the information doesn't stay there. And again, you can go back to what we had mentioned before. Once something no longer serves a business purpose, you should delete it. Protecting data in transit. Post a sign by your office scanner reminding people that they should not email any PI, right? So scanners could either scan to a network folder or they could scan via email. If you're scanning via email, remind people that if they're scanning any kind of sensitive information, that they should not send it to themselves via the email utility on the scanners. Create a policy and post a notice by the scanner so that people are aware of this. If you have PI that needs to be scanned, you could scan it to a folder on your network and then go and immediately remove that document from the scan folder and move it into the secure folder where it should go based on its categorization. Protecting data that protects data. So our passwords, right, protect our data, and it's important to protect our passwords. So keep your password secure. Always use multi-factor authentication. Don't reuse passwords or tell your passwords to others. Don't store or transmit passwords electronically without encryption. And follow the NIST password guidelines for good cybersecurity. As a matter of fact, passwords should never be transmitted or written down electronically. My preference is if you cannot memorize. I know that there's a lot of passwords that we need to have these days, especially since we're telling you not to reuse passwords. But take your passwords, put them on a sheet of paper, and keep them in a safe. And you could probably memorize the top 10 systems or sites that you use. You could probably have those memorized, and then when you use or need to go to one of the other sites that you don't use as frequently, go open your safe, look at your password, and that's a good place for them because they will not get hacked. Properly dispose of data. Wipe devices before discarding them or sending them out for repair. Use device wipe for devices that are lost or stolen. Wipe copy machine hard drives, or use secure disposal copy machine services. Keep track of current and off-boarded devices and document destroyed data. Destroy any data that no longer serves a business purpose, and shred paper documents using a shredding service. And also very important, when you have a device that contains sensitive data that's going to be sent out for repair, whether you're sending it back to the manufacturer or you're taking it to the repair shop, that you should never, A, give the repair shop your password to the device. B, if you have sensitive data and you're shipping it with the hard drive, make sure that the hard drive is encrypted. And C, if you do not have encrypted the hard drive, then you should remove the hard drive before sending it out to be repaired. Same with copy machine. Most modern copy machines are really scanner, and they're scanning devices that maintain information on a hard drive. So if your scanner is off lease, it's going to probably go to somebody else who's going to be the next person to lease it. And if that device has a hard drive and whatever you've scanned is stored on that hard drive, that other entity may have access to that, will have access to that information. So just keep that in mind. Create written policies that dictate how private data should be handled. Define the security levels, who can have access to what, how the data should be stored and transported, and how it should be destroyed and tracked. Designate an employee in your organization to oversee data policy and to periodically do audits. Require an employee to handle private data, to take data privacy and cybersecurity training at least once per year, and identify individuals that pose a risk. Create a policy that defines what steps to take in case a data breach or disclosure happens. Add privacy expectation clause if you monitor your organization's devices. Okay, so thank you very much for having joined our privacy course.